Welcome to episode 8 of Storm the Norm, the fortnightly podcast where we pick up norms that come in the way of businesses succeeding in a disruptive world. I'm Narayan.
And I'm Anisha Motwani.
Anisha, I was thinking of how to introduce the norm we're going to storm today, but then I figured introducing the norm was more important than how to introduce it. I know that sounds a little meta and more than a little cryptic, but indulge me for a minute.
So what exactly do you have in mind?
So this norm is one of the most innocuous sounding ones, even one of the most cliched. But as I've thought about it, I realize it has layers and layers that aren't that easy to unpeel. Before we get to the layers, here's the norm. Form always follows function. Let me repeat that. Form always follows function. The norm is that it must always be subservient to function. After all, what good is a book's cover if there's nothing in the book itself? What good is skin-deep beauty? What good is a loud-mouthed oratorial politician if he can't deliver the goods? I could go on and on with the metaphors, but this is not just about metaphors. In the world of business and brands especially, form is not just useless, it's irrelevant if it's not served first by great function.
I love the conviction with which you've stated the norm, Narayan. And the stronger the conviction, the more difficult it is to storm this one. I can see that. But as you hinted at the beginning, there are layers and layers to this norm. And it's not as innocuous as it sounds. Allow me to elaborate.
You've got my attention.
Firstly, I don't think we can afford to see either form or function as monolithic or unchanging concepts, static in nature. They're dynamic and constantly evolving. What that means is that when someone asks the question, does form always follow function? The right answer is, it depends.
Ooh, I'm not going to let you get away so easily, Anisha. It depends is my patented answer to any complex question thrown at me. My question to you is, how can we storm the norm if the definition of the concept itself can't be pinned down?
That's precisely what I want to get to as well, Narayan. How do you define form and function? Are they synonymous with style and substance? Do they change based on individual characteristics and contexts of people and businesses? Do they vary basis the medium or the expression? Do they change over time? Is form only expression? Is function only about utility? And now you understand why it's so difficult to pin this one down.
Okay, I'm seeing the layers and the layers, but can you please start unpeeling?
For the purpose of simplicity and this episode, let's just restrict the scope to form in context to 3 layers here.
Okay.
First is form in context of people.
Okay.
In an always-on world, with social media scrutinizing everything we say or do, how you look, how you do things, form has gained so much more importance. And dare I say, more than the function. Look at how the current Prime Minister Modi has defined himself based on the form, and how the lack of such a definition cost the previous one, Dr. Manmohan Singh, dearly. Think also about business people. Anand Mahindra has built his image not so much on what he says or the utility he creates, but also how he projects himself. Not just in the real world, but also in the virtual world. Mr. Ratan Tata, you would never imagine him that he would be on Instagram. The man feels the need to be on Instagram to project himself anew. That he is current and he's contemporary with the times. He understands business in today's context. The late Sushma Swaraj built her reputation as an approachable leader thanks to her usage of Twitter, not just what she did in her job. So when it comes to people, individuals, form, performance has become so very crucial.
Okay, so that's in the context of people.
And secondly, look at in the form of products and brands. Gold is gold, shaped, designed, fashioned in the same traditional ways by family jewelers for years till Tanishq came about. Okay, and they added and contemporized it with the leading forms. They got designers on board. They got aesthetics into gold jewelry like nobody else has ever been able to do. Now, this is a beauty category and this is a form category. But let's look at even some other categories like a refrigerator. Okay. For years, we've seen form of a refrigerator where the freezer is at the top and the vegetable section is at the bottom. the human insight that why not have the vegetable sections, which is opened much more frequently at top, and freezer, which is not opened at all, at least once a day or less, at the bottom, because then you don't need to bend that much. So a very functional category like a refrigerator just changed the form based on a human insight. Thirdly, let's look at form in context of business. Indira Nooyi shaped Pepsi into a consistently successful business by infusing design thinking into every aspect of the business. While she is more acknowledged for the company's move forwards towards healthy snacking, where it started was by her shifting the focus to design thinking-led culture organization-wide. And we'll build more upon this.
Okay. That's already a lot to chew on, and I'm guessing those are just the tip of the iceberg. Anisha, this also sounds to me like a really good time to introduce our guest for today with whom we will explore this norm, don't you think?
I was going to suggest the same thing. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Roshan Abbas to Storm the Norm. It's my absolute pleasure to present the multifaceted, supremely talented Roshan Abbas in this episode of Storm the Norm. Wikipedia profiles him as one of India's finest orators and storytellers, TV and radio host, producer, director, and founder-director of a company, Geometry and Compass, one of India's largest and most awarded experiential marketing agency. So welcome to the show, Roshan.
Thank you. It's so good to see you
Yes.
after many failed attempts
Yes,
to try to
and
meet.
thank you for actually adjusting at such a short notice.
Not at all.
This time, the norm that I plan to storm with you is something that's completely up your alley. Form follows function in business.
Yep.
Said in other words, form is all about appearance. It's all about the external part of it all, It's about presence, it's about style, and what we call in the more hard-coded business world, something that's more external and something that's more flamboyant.
Right.
And function is considered to be a little more serious. It's the real content and the real action. And by describing the norm the way I've described, form follows function in business, it is assumed that form actually is not so important.
Right.
Inherent in that phrase is what is more important is the content, the substance, and not so much the form.
Right.
And I know that you do a lot of work in the area of storytelling. For me, that's a very fundamental part of form.
Right.
How you orate a story, how you engage the audience is as important as what is the story.
Right.
You can have a very exciting story, a very engaging story, but delivered in a dull, unengaging, boring manner could actually put anybody to sleep.
Yes.
Now, that's just one part of what you do. So, I just wanted to understand from you the work that you do in your area. What is more important? Is form more important or function more important?
When you come to the world of communication, largely, you need to be very aware of your function, but then the form is very critical. Today, form is very often defined by the medium that you're communicating on. If I had to look at communicating the function of a particular business on, let's for example say Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, the form of each of these is different and so is its function. So let us say that on Twitter, I have to be absolutely succinct in what I'm saying. It's an information platform. It's an intelligence sharing platform. Now, immediately the form of what I'm doing, let us say my core function is to communicate, say for example, what Geometry and Compass does, right? Which is that it's an experiential marketing agency. But if I do it on Twitter, I do it in bite-sized pieces of information.
Sure.
When I do it on Facebook, I'm often talking to people about the experiences we create and I talk about the human elements of it because Facebook is a far more personal thing. So I would very often be possibly sharing pictures, etc. of an event and talking to people about saying so-and-so completed 15 years with us, establishing that as the form saying here's a human facing business. On Instagram, I have to make sure that I have either video because it's a platform where people will engage with video first. And I'll go with very, very strong pictures and I will not put information below because no one reads there. If I'm on LinkedIn, I have to turn and say what I did for a particular client is going to be good. So in every one of these, I'm telling a story, but if you see the form is constantly changing, while at its core, I have taken the root function and said, here are 4 or 5 things that I need to do.
So when I hear you speak, it almost sounds like how important is this root content that you've created? That's rich, that's meaningful, or no, it's okay to actually keep it very basic and direct and simple as long as you're making the form engaging.
To give you just an example, one of the most latest ventures I'm involved in is Commune. And Commune is an art platform that I've developed. In the first year when I did it, I really didn't know the function. I was creating an entity that would get performing arts to the center of a conversation.
Sure.
So I said, being a performing artist all my life and having made that into my profession, I said, maybe how can I help young performing artists?
Yeah.
It was a formless organization. It was a function. Honestly, if you ask me, I would be, tantamount to say that it was almost functionless because I didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
We would try storytelling. We would try nurturing two ideas. We would hire two people. We would say, should we do a live event? What will we do? But slowly, over the first year, and I think creative ventures, I don't think need to start with a function. You can start functionless and say, let's experiment.
Okay.
But you land at something. So one day after a workshop we did with someone, we landed at saying, so what's the core belief of Commune? The core belief of Commune is create great art and great artists. Now I know the function of what I'm doing. Now I need to hire for the function. If I want to create great art and great artists, how will I do it? Now I start getting into my methodology. And the form it has taken today is we're an online, offline platform of content creation in the performing arts. Now I found a bit of a form. Now that form has further evolved. To reach the largest audience, I need to be online, but to reach the most effectively and to create long bonds with consumers, I do a festival that finished 3 days ago, which is why it's so in my head. But we had 13,000 people present there. Those people have carried that particular format of the festival with them. The core function still remains the same. Great art, great artists. But I am creating this new form outside. To make young artists develop their talent. Again, my core function, great art, great artists. But how do I create great artists? I give them a platform. Unfortunately, the monolithic brand days are over. Brands are in constant evolution. But I think brands need to do an audit of form and function maybe every 6 months today.
So you are in many ways then confirming to the norm that form follows function. See, both form and function are dynamic and they have to keep evolving in today's day and age. Otherwise, in any case, there are survival issues at stake.
Yes.
Okay? From the days of John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, the erstwhile presidents of US, where it was more about factual, fact-based, policy-based debates, today there is just flamboyance and there is a lot of gibberish and there's a lot of style. You look at Trump, Hillary Clinton and all of those things. In today's day and age, the glitzy world, perception is taking over reality. Form is actually becoming more and more important than function. How do you see this as a trend? Do you see this as a trend where suddenly you will see that form precedes function and not follows function?
I think in the case of individuals, very often what happens is that the way you're talking of form in this case, right? If you are doing something well, not communicating, which is why I keep going back saying that you have to be good communicators because the world is seeking your voice on many more platforms. Earlier there were not so many platforms where we were seeking voices. Jo dikhta hai, wo bikhta hai wali baat thi. People used to really believe,
आप तो बोलते हैं जो बिकता है वही दिखेगा.
बिल्कुल, right? And that's so what happens is that for a short term, form lands this way. Because what did Trump do? Trump was very clear that his audience was not the coasts. He was very clear that he was part of the Christian heartland and he was giving voice to what they were not saying for so long. Let us also agree that
he did have a core function.
He did. He definitely had a function. Mr. Modi had a very core function. He was turning and saying that this appeasement of liberal views at the cost of the majority. That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, they went only after form. Frankly, if they had balanced function, today the question is, people are questioning your form because you're just not delivering, because you're not being able to, maybe your hidden function is now becoming visible. If the form cannot be ratified by function, okay, I'll give you an example. Unilever's today struggling with a brand called Fair and Lovely. Why?
Sure.
Because it was a great proposition at one point in time. But today that proposition is being
Yeah,
questioned.
the function is being questioned.
Scrubs, the television show, was a very popular show in the last decade.
Yeah.
Today, when you watch that show, it comes with a disclaimer saying the views on this show are of the times it represents. Because today, that form just doesn't go. It's not authentic.
Yeah.
Right? There are sexist jokes, etc., which we all laughed at.
Yeah.
But today you turn and say, oh my God, that is such a chauvinistic viewpoint. That isn't woke in any way.
So what you are in effect saying that the function is not static. Okay?
Absolutely.
Function is today collective.
Yes.
And that collective is not the responsibility of just the originator of the function,
Right.
but the recipient of the function as well.
Right.
So there's a conversation happening, and the function today is actually evolving from between the giver and the taker. Coming to, say, product brands. Okay. Let's pick up automobiles as a category. That's
Right.
one industry where
Yeah.
I worked in. Examples of great products, okay, but very poor form. Cars that look like nothing on earth. Baleno. I remember, how
Yes.
much that brand struggled, but it's a perfectly good car. But today, Brezza, Maruti, same Brezza, doing so well at the time that it was launched. The MG Hector today, it just the presence, the sheer design philosophy of that car is making heads turn. However, today, that's not enough. So when it comes to product brands and the new evolution of design thinking that is happening in products, is that also feeding into this whole thing of trying to balance the form and function?
What does MG Hector or what does Brezza get right?
Yeah.
MG Hector gets the fact that I have a young millennial who, oh my God, my car talks to me. Look at what they project, right?
Yeah.
So even in the form they saying, but what are they saying? We are more responsive, right? What did a Brezza do? A Brezza said, okay, for this generation, being out there, the look is a lot more important because the basic form has been met.
Yeah.
But tomorrow, if a Tesla came to India, hell, everybody would move that side because the function is far more in tune with the consumer.
Yeah.
The consumer says, oh my God, I'll tell you, there was a conversation I was having with somebody where there was a 7 Series being bought by someone. And the person turned and said, do you have a variant that's going to be will be environmentally better? So the person turned and said, you're buying a car which is worth $1 crore plus. Why are you so concerned? I mean, it was a joke. So over a drink, somebody was saying, why are you so concerned about the environment? He said, my children will ask me. Right? Today, that's the important factor is a far more informed consumer is making choices basis that.
Yeah.
So when a Tesla comes in, that's what will happen. Sometimes when I'm looking, say, for a charger for a device on Amazon, and if it's Amazon approved, it's become my ISI mark. I don't care what the brand is because it's only supporting a function. But the minute there is anything emotive that is attached to that brand, the minute it is Apple and it's a charger from Apple, I do not grudge the fact that that charger cost me 8 times more.
Yeah.
Because apart from the functionality comes a form which says there's great design behind this. This is the creator's brand. When I will be seen with this earpod, I can get an equivalent of a earpod for 1/10 the price.
Yeah.
But what are we excited about? Oh, it shows, look at who I am resonating with.
Yeah.
My form is reflecting a lot of the core functions that the brand and I overlap with.
So Roshan, your last words on does form follow function or vice versa?
In a highly evolutionary, ever-changing world, I think both are dynamic and you need a balance of both. One without the other is meaningless because, again, every brand will have a core function but will at the same time have to discover the best form to put it out there. As new formats evolve, you will sometimes have to evolve the function as well because you might suddenly discover an insight that you didn't have before.
Yeah.
So the jury's out. I think we'll have to turn and say that this is a love all.
Thank you so much. This has been really an insightful session.
Thank you.
Pleasure having you.
Anisha, after that stimulating conversation with Roshan, the one thing that seems to have been reinforced as an answer to whether form follows function is, it depends. But I'm taking a couple of other things also from the conversation before we get a fix on how to storm this norm. The first is that as we increasingly move into the age of the 4th industrial revolution where machines are taking on cognitive tasks, it seems like humanity would be best served by outsourcing function to the machines. And in doing so, we take back the opportunity for which we are best suited, to apply imagination to maximizing form. That's the first thing. The second is actually altering the original question. Perhaps the question is not whether form leads or function leads. If we can create intelligent machines that we can outsource function to, then the question to my mind is not whether form can lead, but how we can lead form.
Interesting.
Design thinking has always been one of the best approaches to innovation, and we always put down the aesthetic design part of design thinking as somewhat superficial and needing to be subservient to utilitarian design.
True.
But as Apple has most famously shown, and as Roshan Abbas reinforced, when emotive interactions are in play, then there is nothing more important than form, than aesthetic design. And to my mind, one of the most understated but most critical linchpins for business success, especially in a disruptive world, is to make every interaction between a business and its customers emotive, not just utilitarian.
Yeah, or functional.
Yeah, and therefore, form must lead function, if you ask me.
So you have come back to accepting that it's not, it depends.
Well, actually, you got me there. Those are my thoughts at the moment. What's your take, Anisha? I mean, what STN fundas do you have for our audience this time around?
Today, function in many, many categories is becoming hygiene. It's becoming like the base minimum. There isn't too much left to differentiate on function except for incremental changes. So the larger, more competitive advantages for businesses or products is coming in the form of form.
Okay.
Pun intended. So the more attention deficit the world today is, an attractive form can sometimes be very magical. It can stop you in your tracks. It can almost predict what is to follow inside. It can cue in function even before you've seen the function. Function needs to be experienced. Form is more visual.
It's a very profound point. You made me think of something that Daniel Kahneman talks about. I think, if I'm not wrong, he talks about system A and system B thinking, and how we are led to make decisions based on what we perceive immediately rather than more nuanced, involved thinking. What you're saying is form is the signal to help with that thinking.
Absolutely. In today's day and age, when there's such a shortage of time and attention, a great form can lead you into taking decisions much faster.
Okay, that makes sense.
Form is also a great integrator and organizer in many ways, because what form does is it's almost like it very elegantly and gracefully integrates and organizes components of the function. Whether it is technology, and we are talking about the whole customer journey, there are various components and a great form stitches it together seamlessly.
Today's design world calls it UI, user interface. But actually, it's so much more than just those two words, because what you're saying is this power of organizing and simplifying function so that it is intuitive and understood by anybody. That's two.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds to me like where you're leading to with the third funda is that form actually is your best ally in helping shape user experience.
To go back to Pepsi as an example, in the old way, a women's snacking product would merely have been a pink-colored bag of chips or some such thing. But design thinking gave them the insight that women don't eat chips like men. They don't empty crumbs directly from the bottom of the bag into their mouths like men do. Or they don't wipe the crumbs on their clothes or the furniture. So less crumbly chips in a stackable pull-out tray was the way the women's snacking product was designed. So what I'm saying is that we need to look at form and function differently from how we've looked at it thus far. In essence, form and function are two sides of the same coin. Function is content, form is context. Function is action, form is performance. I mean, the famous example of Twitter is 140 characters. I need to shape my content to that context. And you can just apply that context and content philosophy, whether it is to products or to businesses or to human beings. When we look at it this way, context always comes before content. If you don't know the context, you don't know how to shape the content to it.
One of the, what was until now, considered one of the most unglamorous but most ubiquitous sports in India, Kabaddi. I don't think in urban communities we would have ever considered following Kabaddi avidly. But like you said, it was the context that made it unglamorous, even if it was ubiquitous. But when you change that context, when you change that form and you introduced it as a pro Kabaddi league, and suddenly everybody's like, this is the second most glamorous thing after the IPL. I'm going back to another word that you used in the beginning. You described form as performance, I remember. So if form is performance, how would you describe function?
Function is action. I know they are both synonyms in many ways, performance and action. But
I see the nuance.
Yeah, especially in context the layer of an individual. Content is what you say, performance is how you say it. In the context of an automobile, performance is how it performs, function is what are the components of that particular automobile.
I was actually going to a more frivolous example of, say, Jean-Claude Van Damme. He performs action, but when Craig Daniel performs it, it's performance.
It's performance,
not just action,
yes.
Right?
And that's why he's born.
All right. Okay, that's brilliant insights from those three different perspectives. The ability of form to predict function, or for it to organize function and intuitively allow you to magically experience it, and then to shape user experience. I think those are all some incredible insights on how we can look at form completely differently from how we looked at it, and how to look at it as two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Fantastic. I'm going to add one other thing over here. Like as with every episode, there are many things I pick up every time you put out the fundas out there. But if I had to highlight one, it would be this. The question is not if form can lead function. In fact, in a world and in an age where function is hygiene and taken for granted, and every action is publicly visible in an attention deficit world, form must lead. Without it, a business or a brand are doomed to being ignored at best and to irrelevance at worst.
Completely agree.
That brings us to the end of episode 8 of Storm the Norm. This is Narayan and
Anisha
signing off for now. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud by just searching for Storm the Norm. We'll be back with a new episode in a few weeks. Thank you and talk to you soon.